Good evening. Welcome to the City of Everett meeting of the Planning Commission for Tuesday, November 17th, 2020. We will call this meeting to order, and I'd like to begin with a roll call. Kathy, could you please call through the commissioners?
Chair Yanasak.
Here.
Commissioner Labra.
Here.
Commissioner Tisdale.
Here.
Commissioner Beck.
Here.
Commissioner Zielinski.
Here.
Commissioner McGinn.
Here.
Commissioner Lark.
Here.
Commissioner Finch.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, welcome everyone. And as is our practice here when we're doing our virtual meetings, I do have some general instructions that I will read through. The situation we are currently dealing with is constantly changing. As part of the Governor's Safe Start proclamation, the Planning Commission is conducting our meeting remotely. Unfortunately, we are not able to allow members of the community to gather in person or attend. We want to protect you and your families and recognize the need for social distancing. We do encourage you to provide comments or concerns on any matter via email at planning@everettwa.gov. You may also watch the meetings on Comcast Channel 21 or Frontier Channel 29 or online at www.everettwa.gov/Everett Channel Stream. You may also listen in telephonically if you do not have digital access. Please call 425-616-3920. Conference ID 606-059-033#. The public is allowed to participate via the same call-in number and conference ID. If you are accessing this meeting via phone, please be aware that there is about a 10-second delay on the broadcast and stream. If you wish to download the presentation materials or wish to comment and need to see the visual in real time, please visit everettwa.gov/Planning Commission. And I would like to remind anyone participating to please mute your microphone. You can do that with your mute button or by pressing *6 until you may be called upon. We thank you for your patience and understanding. We know these are challenging times, and we appreciate your willingness to be transparent, to continue to reach out to our community, and to keep everyone informed as we navigate through this time. One additional point that I will make, and hopefully nobody will really notice, but we are conducting this meeting a little bit differently tonight in that both all planning commissioners and the general public, we are involved in the same virtual meeting. Typically, we have been running these on 2 simultaneous meetings, one for the planning commissioners and a separate one for the public. So if you are here in attendance, just know that we're all on the same phone line here, and please be respectful and wait your turn to speak and be mindful of that mute button so that we don't have any unnecessary disruptions. With that, we'll move to approval of minutes from our last meeting. Everybody had an opportunity to review those, and do any commissioners have questions or comments or suggestions for additions or changes?
I move for adoption.
Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, Kathy, let's go for a vote.
Commissioner Lark.
Yes.
Commissioner McGinn.
Yes.
Commissioner Zielinski.
Yes.
Commissioner Beck.
Yes.
Commissioner Tisdale.
Yes.
Commissioner Labra.
Yes.
Chair Yanasak.
Yes.
Thank you.
And I would like to ask if there's any commissioners with anything to report for the group, for the good of the order. Maybe I'll just go ahead, Commissioner Lark.
This is a deviation from just this is something very report worthy, I have to say, deviation from what we traditionally talk about, which is land use. But as a personal update, I just want to share some incredible news on my end. I got engaged the other week.
Congratulations.
Yes, extremely excited. she lives here in Korea, and we talked about her future. She used to live in Washington. Her name is Bo, and we're excited that we're going to call when my tour is over here. We're going to call Everett our home. So this is really, really great news. I really wanted to share. So I cannot express how excited I am. So I just want to tell everybody.
All right, congratulations. Can anybody top that? Any other reports?
Can they see us?
Mm-mm.
I would like that. Can
Okay, I will take that as no additional reports. With that, let's go ahead and move into any staff comments before we begin? David?
Yeah, just a few comments and updates. David Stalheim, Interim Planning Director. So first off, the City Council did pass the package of Rethink zoning ordinances. So there was 2 ordinances, one amending the comprehensive plan and one amending the development codes. Those are signed by the mayor and they go into effect on November 24th. So everything on our website has been updated to reflect the changes that have been adopted. There were some little amendments that were done as we went through City Council. A few of them were adjustments based on additional staff work of looking at things, just getting some clarification. 2 council things that were actually 3 council things that were initiated. Some changes in the shoreline permit process. We had some shoreline permits going to the planning director for review, and that was changed to the bigger projects to go to the hearing examiner, which is consistent with existing procedures. There was expansion of where the sidewalk priority areas are to include some arterials that don't necessarily have frequent transit, but are on transit routes and are important connectivity areas, and that was something that Councilmember Bader brought up. And then some things about private streets in land divisions, and so we did all those. Staff is continuing to work on starting to review a lot of projects that are coming in or pre-application meetings and continue to go through the code. We had tested quite a bit and felt fairly comfortable, but I think there'll be issues, and so just I think all the commission was aware of that. We talked about that, and so don't be surprised that there are some housekeeping amendments that will be coming through the Planning Commission over the next couple of months as we see these issues, as we work with applicants and find the code is there's a couple of things that just didn't quite work the way that they were supposed to, or things that are missing, and so there may be some things that will be coming your way, and we'll be doing that. Second thing I want to just update is the recruitment for the planning director. I think I mentioned at the last meeting that the city had recruited and had gotten some really good applicants that came in from quite a few different areas and had narrowed it down to 7, and then they interviewed, and then they narrowed it down to a couple. They are working with one candidate right now as their top candidate that wants to come and visit the community and spend time with their family and make a decision, because it's a relocation from out of state for this person. And so we'll see how that goes. So there's not going to be a new planning director immediately, and so there's going to be continued interim. And just heads up, this is probably my last meeting with you guys, and I want to appreciate all the work that you've done over the years that I've been with the city of Everett. But I had slated to retire by the end of this month, and so there may be another interim planning director come December. But somehow I will be talking a little bit more with Nick Harper, deputy mayor, and folks tomorrow a little bit about any other gaps and making sure that things keep on going along until a permanent planning director gets appointed for the city. So with that, if there's any questions, I'd be glad to try to answer them.
Any questions for David before we move on to item number 1? All right, thank you, David. With that, let's go ahead and move to our first agenda item, the Smith Island West Annexation, and I believe, is that Karen?
Yes, Karen Stewart, Environmental Planner, and I'm going to be sharing my screen. I have a brief slideshow here. Okay, this is your agenda item number 1, Smith Island West Annexation. And tonight you'll be looking at proposed zoning for the upland area. I'm not sure if you've been briefed on this proposal before, but it's a proposed annexation that is using the interlocal agreement method. And this is the cover sheet that we've filed with the Boundary Review Board. And it's still in process. It's not been finalized yet. You'll notice from this slide that the interlocal agreement method may be used for annexation of an area within an urban growth area boundary that have at least 60% of the boundary proposed for annexation that's contiguous to the annexing city. This is the map that was submitted by the applicant that shows the annexation area, which the crosshatched area is the annexation area, and then switching to this exhibit, which is exhibit 1 to your proposed resolution. In color, it helps differentiate a little bit the portion of the annexation areas that are actually tidally influenced, and so they're shown as blue with the cross-hatching. And then the portion of the annexation that we're talking about tonight is the portion that is the cross-hatched area with underlying the purple color. Staff reviewed the comprehensive plan land use designation for the upland portion, and it is currently industrial. This area is within the city's what's called MUGA, which is Municipal Urban Growth Area. And as you saw with the earlier graphic with the purple, the adjacent upland areas are also designated industrial. The implementing zones under our new Rethink zoning scheme are 3. It could be heavy industrial, HI, LI1, which is light industrial 1, and then LI2, light industrial 2. The Shoreline Master Program extends over most of the proposed annexation area, and the upland portion is designated urban mixed-use industrial. Existing land uses on the parcels in question are resource-based industrial uses with earth-moving equipment, large trucks, and the businesses there are owned by Miller Shingle and Pacific Topsoils. So based on staff's review, we are recommending that the heavy industrial HI zone be applied. That's most consistent with these factors. Now tonight, the Planning Commission is requested to consider the draft resolution to recommend to the City Council that they apply heavy industrial zone to the Smith Island West annexation area if approved. And this action is subject to a public hearing with the Planning Commission. So if the commission has any questions, the applicant's representative, Mark Wolken, is available, and staff's available to answer any of your questions. And that concludes our comments.
Thank you, Karen. I guess what I'd maybe do is give Mr. Wolken an opportunity to speak here in a minute, but before we get to him, do any commissioners have questions for Karen?
Karen, I do have one question. This is Commissioner McGinn.
Yes.
I'm wondering, what is the benefit to the property owners to be incorporated with the city of Everett?
So when they're incorporated, if they're in city of Everett, for example, that right now they're surrounded on 3 sides by city of Everett jurisdiction. So it adds obviously consistency to one of the property owners I know has some of their property is already in the city and some of it is not. So then in terms of they would be eligible for the full set of city services, although there's not sewer service available in that area at this time. So those are my comments, but perhaps the applicant Mark Wolken could speak to that more specifically. But I guess I do want to note that we're not asking for any recommendation regarding the annexation. All that is before you tonight is really just what is the appropriate zoning for the area.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Mm-hmm.
And now in terms of benefit to the city annexing this property, how does that benefit the city?
It adds that area to our tax base. And it completes the annexing of our entire urban growth area that had been designated under our long range plans with the MUGA in that area. So it completes that planning process.
Karen, do you
Okay.
want me to add anything? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Is that Mr. Wolken?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, yeah, go ahead. We'd like to hear from you. Thank you. Any comments you have?
Thank you.
So there's a couple of things here. First of all of the services in the area essentially are already provided by the city. So the city's not getting any benefit from that. The roads accessing the properties, their city streets or state highways, the county provides literally nothing other than some regulatory processes that the city's actually probably better positioned to implement. This area's been planned to be in the city for, I think now, well over 25 years. I mean, it was in the comprehensive plan with designations when I worked for the city back in the 1980s. So this is something that's just been hanging out there for a long time. So the city would actually get a little bit of tax revenue it's not presently getting while it's providing some other services. The properties right now are outside of any fire protection. The fire district, when the rest of Smith Island was annexed, the fire district went away out there. So it's kind of a mishmash right now, and just an example of how you don't want to be planning and implementing urban services. Some of the other benefits that the properties will get by being in the city is city water. There's city water on one side of the railroad tracks that they potentially could access to improve the properties. And there's some other projects in the area that are working on transportation improvements that would, they can be better implemented by having all of these properties working together. So I can't think of a good, bad reason that somebody could identify for not having this go through.
Any commissioners have any other questions or comments for Mr. Wolken? I see Commissioner Beck.
Yes, I had my hand raised. So, Mr. Wolken, I think I understand this piece of property pretty well. This seems more like a housekeeping annexation. It's already operating as heavy industrial currently, isn't it?
Yes, you nailed it right on the head. This area really, if you want to go back in history, this area was proposed for annexation in 1982 and 1983 when the rest of Smith Island was added to the city. The only reason it didn't go in was the property owner at the time, Weyerhaeuser, didn't want to pay the city's utility tax. So a irregular boundary was allowed to be established to keep that large former employer in the city happy. So it's housekeeping that's been hanging out there for a couple of decades.
Thank you.
Commissioner McGinn, you also have a question?
Yeah, just a follow-up question. Thank you for providing a little bit more background for us to understand the situation. So will this streamline the process for further development on the site then?
I don't know the context of the term streamline.
Well, if the process, it seems like from site to site, it's a little inconsistent in terms of which jurisdiction you're under, and even it sounds like some properties are divided in half. Will this make it? Will it simplify the process of developing these sites?
Yeah, it'll certainly make things more consistent and predictable. And I think the predictable is probably the bigger part because of the clarity of the jurisdiction. Also, I think the city's shoreline plan is a bit more cognizant of dealing with industrial sites, which I don't think the county shoreline plan, not to criticize it, but it really wasn't designed around anticipating the kinds of water dependent uses that you have as a portion of this. I represent on this project Miller Shingle, and their property is water dependent uses. It's log handling. They're doing a substantial amount of barge work right now. That kind of stuff isn't handled that great in the county shoreline plan compared to the way the city has planned for this. So it'll make things very much more predictable, not just for the property owners, the proponents, but actually for the public as well, because you have a better idea of what can happen and what won't happen.
Any other questions for Mr. Wolken or I suppose Karen Stewart? Mr. Wolken, this is Commissioner Yanusak. I did have one question. If I'm looking at the map correctly, it looks to me that this the area to be annexed contains about maybe 6 or 7 different parcels.
Well, there's I don't know how many. I'd have to go back and count them, but there's probably about 35 or 40 parcels. But there's 2 owners.
Okay, that was my question. How many owners are there? Just 2?
Just 2. You have Miller Shingle, which actually their property, if you go look on the county site, is listed in a holding company name, but it's Miller Shingle, and the remainder of it is owned by Map 2, which is the just literally changed ownership within the last month and a half. It's the parent company of Pacific Topsoil, essentially. So they own the remainder of the properties.
And I guess just to be clear, both property owners are both owners of all the parcels within this are asking for this and in agreement with this.
Yeah, it's the Miller Shingle ownership were the ones that wanted to finally get this moving. The previous owner of Pacific Topsoil sent a letter to the city a year ago in support of it, and in conversations I've had on some related things with the new owners of Map 2 and Pacific Topsoil, they were also in support of it.
Great, thank you. Any other commissioner questions? Okay, hearing none.
I have one
Go
last
ahead.
question.
Sure.
Karen, thank you for clarifying for me that this is not, we are not voting on the annexation itself, but strictly for the revised zoning. Will the annexation itself be a separate vote, or is that something that has already been done?
So the annexation has, because it's subject to the interlocal agreement, it's a little bit different process. So what has happened to date is that the City Council, Everett City Council agreed to begin negotiations with Snohomish County to come up with an interlocal agreement that would address the transfer of responsibilities and services to the area if it were to be annexed. And that started last May. And as of November 4th, Snohomish County completed approval of the interlocal agreement. So we have that completed now. The next step is, once we have the signed agreement, we will have to file the application with the Boundary Review Board clerk, and then the Boundary Review Board has a 45-day comment period. And so that will start once that has happened, and that has not happened today yet. And in the meantime, though, if the annexation were to be approved, then zoning would need to be in place. And so that is the action that the Planning Commission is involved with. So I believe you will not be having a role to approve the annexation, that it will just go back before the City Council once the Boundary Review Board has completed their part of the process.
Okay, thank you so much. I understand the situation much better now. I appreciate that.
Good.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. I think at this point we'll go ahead and open the public hearing. I don't know if Kathy, have you received any early signups for people who wanted to speak on this topic?
I haven't, no.
Okay. Well, if there are any members of the public who wanted to speak, I think what we'll do is, Kathy, could you call through last digits of a phone number, and if you did want to speak on this topic, that would be your opportunity to go ahead and unmute yourself and introduce yourself for the record and go ahead and make your comments.
The first one I have on my list is Andrea.
No comment.
Thank you. I have someone here just titled guest. There's no name or phone number. If you'd like to speak, just unmute. The next guest is Ken. The next guest is Susan Mosshart.
No comment.
Thank you. Next guest with phone extension 9452. Next guest, phone extension 6531.
Yes, this is Dave Koenig. I was interested in item 2, but since I've asked for opportunity to comment, I just would comment support for this proposal. It finishes off the urban growth area as Karen described, and it also provides services to the area that they currently don't have, i.e. the fire support. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next guest, phone extension 7187. And last extension listed 0348.
I believe that's me, Commissioner Yanasak, so I have no additional comment. Any additional, I think that takes care of everybody. Thank you. Any additional comment from commissioners? Hearing none, I think, do we need to have a vote here to close the public meeting, the public hearing?
This is Commissioner Beck. I move that we close this public hearing.
This is Commissioner McGinn. I second.
Thank you. Kathy, could you call a vote?
Yes. Commissioner Finch?
Yes.
Commissioner McGinn?
Yes.
Commissioner Zielinski?
Yes.
Commissioner Beck?
Yes.
Commissioner Tisdale?
Yes.
Commissioner Lavera?
Yes.
Chair Yanasak?
Yes. So we do have a proposed resolution before us today. It's a resolution number 20-06 to adopt heavy industrial zone for Smith Island West annexation. Does anybody have a motion?
Yep. This is Commissioner Lavera. I move that we approve resolution 20-06.
Tisdale, second.
Thank you. Kathy, let's call through for a vote, please.
Commissioner Lark?
Yes.
Commissioner McGinn?
No.
Commissioner Zielinski?
Yes.
Commissioner Beck?
Yes.
Commissioner Tisdale?
Yes.
Commissioner Lavera?
Yes.
Chair Yanasak?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. So that concludes our first agenda item. We'll go ahead and move on to our second agenda item today. It's a proposed resolution regarding housing. And I believe Commissioner Lark, did you have anything you wanted to present?
I just first of all want to highlight, I want to say first of all, thank you to the commission for a lot of the insight and questions asked during the initial reading of this. My goal was to take that feedback and then incorporate that into an updated version. I sincerely hope that that intent was met, that some of those questions and concerns were addressed in here. And I hope to continue the conversation tonight. I'm open to public comment and maybe finding some tweaking, but I hope that that we can get this passed tonight and really kind of put really outline the recommended path and recommended value structures that we want to have going into our conversation around rethink housing. So with that, I will conclude my opening remarks.
Before we move to public comment, were there any commissioners with questions or comments or anything for Commissioner Lark?
I have a question for David. So what, I was looking at our last meeting, this is Commissioner Lavra, and what is the timeline for Rethink Housing? I didn't see that on there.
You know, I'm going to pass that on to Becky McCrary. I think Becky is on the line, and she's going to lead the Rethink Housing effort.
Good evening, Commissioners. Becky McCrary, Housing and Community Development Program Manager. Yes, we are relaunching the Rethink Housing project, which is
Becky, you're muted.
Becky, you went to mute.
oh my goodness, I was so far into my response. Anyway, Becky McCrary, Housing and Community Development Program Manager for the City of Everett. Yes, Rethink Housing is a project that is been relaunched, and that program is very much tied to the Commerce grant that the city received for the House Bill 1923, that work. And at least the recommendations for how the city would establish actions, strategies, changes to policy, potential changes to regulations, that work will need to be completed by the end of June of 2021. So that's the schedule moving forward. So you will start to see some outreach efforts, public processes, and as well as Planning Commission updates as we move forward in this process.
Thank you.
Any other commissioner comments or questions?
This is Tisdale. Where David or staff, I'm sorry, I forgot your name. Where will this be? If I'm a person that's looking to come in and develop some property, where will this, where will I find this document?
The resolution itself, or
Yes.
I guess I would punt that back to Kathy and David. If this is a Planning Commission resolution, does it reside on the resolution or on the Planning Commission website?
Not at this point. I don't have them out on the web.
Is the intention to forward this to City Council? It would certainly be something that we would have it in our record as we move through the Housing Action Plan.
Thank you. My other question is the single family side of this deal. I know we got a couple of folks that commented, and I'm kind of in that same, why the exclusion of single family housing in this?
Commissioner Lark, I see you have your hand raised. Did you want to address that or some?
I think I could, two quick point of clarification. And then actually two quick points of clarification. Going back to Commissioner Tisdale's first question, finding where this resolution will be. I think as this resolution is written, it is giving a lot of guidance or making recommendations for guidance for a process and the creation of product. Specifically, and I think one of the most important recommendations for the creation of a product would be the goal setting, the measures of effectiveness and measures of performance. And so I think finding where those, articulating where those pieces of information could be found would be extremely useful. And because this resolution asks for the creation of those, recommends the request of the creation of those through the Rethink process. So I think having those also be very visible as into what our intent and goal is with our Rethink process, having that be and how we're measuring our success with the Rethink process, having those being accessible would be essential. But going back to, I think, why are we focusing on single family? And so it's, for me, I think in this kind of a little a million foot view is, the world is pretty gray, but there's varying shades of gray. And so when we look into, look at housing, we see there is a muddled history for all land use types. And I think now that we're having an opportunity to discuss single family zoning, we have an opportunity to discuss a land use pattern that was explicitly and intentionally in its initial concept and design at the national level of this country, after the Euclid case in the beginning of the 20th century, was explicitly and intentionally designed to exclude poor people, communities of color, and essentially non-wealthy white people from home ownership options. It was done so in a far more aggressive, deliberate, and intentional manner. And there's ample documented evidence. I highly recommend going through, and please read The Color of Law. It is a very extremely well-researched book by Richard Rothstein. And so the opportunity that now we're focusing on, we as a procedural mechanism are looking at single family zoning and how we want single family zoning to look in our community. And then we also have an opportunity to look at a land use pattern that has been, more egregious in its impacts for communities of color and low-income families and working families, and disproportionately impacted these communities and people from accessing wealth. So this is in the Army, we would call this. So actually, if I may say, I forgot to say this at the beginning, all opinions tonight expressed by myself are personal opinions that do not reflect the Department of Defense, the United States Army, United States Forces of Korea, or the 8th Army. My apologies for the sidebar there. That being said, looking at this is a decisive component here. This is we look at where can we have the biggest impact to make these changes, and this isn't single family use, which is why I think, here and now we have an opportunity to make an outsized impact for people, because A, we're looking at it now, but B, this land use pattern has had the most impact. So this is the place to really make that change and make that impact. That's why I'm focusing in on it. Hopefully that provides clarity.
What was any analogy done, Alex, on the affordability? Does this create more layers and or more cost to the marketplace when you start saying we can have this kind of home, but we can't have this kind of home? So I don't get those questions mixed. Was there any look and or analysis of if you applied this in the last 5 years into a neighborhood in Everett, would it have created more affordable housing, or would it have increased the housing values? And when I say housing, I'm talking all types, because I believe we need all types of housing, not any one singular type.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question, Commissioner Tisdale. And I think let's go back down to the therefore clauses. I mean, we have a lot of extremely important facts to establish in the whereas clauses. And I think there's general consensus on we want to undo. I think as a commission, we care about people. We want to undo historic and systemic racism in this. And so that the whereas clauses have that in there. And so when we move into the therefore component, what we're thinking about doing is we're asking and putting guidance into the questions that need to be asked during this process. This document wants to set up questions to be asked during the Rethink process, but it's not dictating the explicit outcomes of it. We want to rethink the scope and pervasiveness of single family zoning in Everett. The scope and pervasiveness needs to be addressed, but say, for example, we come to a conclusion where more townhomes, more density that isn't authorized under all the single family zoning here in this city is utilized. We'll have an opportunity to say, does that address our goals? Because more importantly, if we go down to set the therefores in 3 and 4, we look at our measures of effectiveness and measures of performance. One of the most important things we need to have in policy going forward is a goal. What are we seeking to do with these measures of effectiveness and measures of performance so we can measure whether or not it's being useful? And so with that, that will be, those affordability is going to be that measure of effectiveness and measures of performance. If the policy recommendations that come out of the process that we're asking don't meet our MOPs, MOEs, then that's not the policy we need. But one of the reasons why we're talking so much about single family land use, and communities of color, making sure that they're part of that conversation, that they are at the table, being able to put influence into those measures of effectiveness and measures of performance, because they've been traditionally marginalized and excluded from these processes. So I think to summarize it, we're looking for the question that Commissioner Tisdale is asking is a question that needs to be discussed when we are establishing our measures of effectiveness and measures of performance for our single family zoning.
This is Becky McCrary again, Chair. Could I say a few words?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to follow on Commissioner Lark's comments, not to elongate this conversation, but as we go through the Rethink housing process, some of the work that we are doing, and that's not looking at the past, but it is looking at the future and what the economics are for this type of housing in Everett. And again, we can only do a snapshot, as you know, because we are in an ever-changing world. But that is something that we will be able to bring forward some high-level economic data. And then, as Commissioner Lark indicated, a big part of the Housing Action Plan is measuring the outcomes of the actions that we're taking. That's easy in some respects and challenging in other respects, but nonetheless important to know the actions that get implemented are in fact having an impact on the outcomes that we're seeking.
Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe what we'll do now is it sounded like there's at least Mr. Koenig sounded like he was interested in adding some input on this topic. We'll go ahead and maybe open up the public comment time, and then we can come back to any additional commissioner questions. So maybe Kathy, could you go ahead and maybe call through again and see if any of our attendees tonight wanted to add any input?
Sure. The first guest, Andrea.
I'm not prepared for questions yet because I just found the new resolution. So ultimately, I would like to ask some questions, but I defer to the next person.
Okay, I'll come back to you. There's somebody here, just guest. There's no phone number there. The next guest is Ken. The next guest is Susan Mosshart.
No comments, thank you.
Thank you. Next guest, phone extension 9452. Next guest, extension 6531.
Yes, this is Dave Koenig. My address is 1302 Madrona Avenue, Everett. I provided a written comment to staff to provide to the Planning Commission over the weekend, and I hope you received that. But I am suggesting, well, first, it's a very important topic. Affordable housing for all is very important, and I think it's good that the city's looking at this. The first comment I had is on number 2. The current language goes to saying things should happen before the policies are developed and such. So it's currently reads expansion of building types, land use patterns, and density. I am suggesting language that says consider the expansion of building types, review land use patterns, and review density allowed in areas currently zoned for single family structures. You as a board are like judges, and I think it's important that you don't make some conclusions as the process goes on, find out what happens, and you may end up there, but I think consider the language that I have suggested, I think is more appropriate. And then number 6 is to provide some direction for public notice and outreach. I really think there needs to be very extensive public notice and direct outreach explaining this effort to all property owners who would be affected, neighborhood groups, and groups and individuals that have been traditionally excluded from home ownership opportunities. So that's the number 6 that I'm suggesting be added to the resolution. I think it's really important that the public is notified on these things directly. And what I mean by directly is direct mail and such, not people having to go to the website. We're in a time with people with COVID and job losses and such. If you really want to outreach to people, you really need to contact people. And so that's there. And then also, I don't know if Planning Commission was aware that the mayor did a directive today, number 2020-03, Affordable Housing for All, that talks about affordable housing and sets up some things, and staff can provide that to you. But I received that through an email today, and it was issued today. So if you haven't seen that from the office of the mayor, that's my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Koenig. Just to assure you, we did receive your comment that you submitted previously, so thank you for that. Looks like we have one more guest, Kathy.
Phone extension 7187.
Yes. Am I off mute now?
Yeah, go ahead. Did you have?
Okay.
If you could just state your name and address for the record, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure you could hear me. This is Dylan Sluter with the Master Builders Association. I'm the Snohomish County manager there, and I submitted comments as well. I think our main concern is focused on sort of singling out the single family, as Commissioner Tisdale called to focus. It's more the language that we have a problem with. I think the support overall for the message, we're right there with you all, but we want to make sure that every housing type can be a part of this solution, and we don't want to disparage any specific, single family units versus multifamily. I have builders that build across the board, and I have to represent them. And I think that, multiple different styles and variety and attainability should be looked at in this Rethink housing. And so some of the language, especially with, the recommendation in number 1 that we called out, the pervasiveness of the single family. While I understand sort of the background and the issues with that, I think that tone may be a little bit leaning towards not wanting single family type housing to be a part of that solution. And we just wanted to call that forward and say, hey, we want every type of housing to be a part of that, and we want all of it to be considered. So I think that sort of covers our perspective from that end. But we overall support the issue and the message behind this. We just want to make sure that it doesn't exclude any type of housing.
Thank you. I think that was all we had. Did Andrea, did you wish to go back to you at this point?
No, I'm not prepared. Thank you. I do agree, though, all types of housing, we do need all types of housing, but we also need a pathway for purchasing homes versus all of the apartments we've been building lately. So a pathway to ownership is extremely important for all types of housing also. But that's about it. Thank you.
Okay, Kathy, I think, was that everybody?
That's everybody.
Okay, I see Commissioner McGinn.
Hi, yeah, I wanted to say thank you to Mr. Sluter and also to Andrea for your comments. Those especially resonated with me because I think some of the language maybe in this resolution is somewhat alienating in terms of, single family housing being demonized when that's not really, I think, the message that is being conveyed. I do agree that a pathway to ownership is extremely important. I also agree that, our single family housing stock is sufficient to meet our community's need at the moment. We are being tasked as a community, though, to accommodate a tremendous amount of growth. And that's something that can really only be done economically with more thoughtful multifamily projects. I think that opportunities to own within a multifamily project are going to be very important going forward. I also think that we should remove some of the language that excludes single family housing because all housing types should be included in our vision of the future. However, I do think an emphasis needs to be placed on making multifamily projects livable and accessible for everyone. Just because the volume of housing that we need to account for is so great.
Thank you. Commissioner Finch, I see your hand also raised.
Thank you. So a couple things. It strikes me that the Rethink housing process combined with the mayor's directive today in many ways covers the focus on content that Commissioner Lark has attempted to identify in this draft resolution. I think that the first two points, the rethink the scope of pervasiveness of single-family zoning. One could also say rethink the underutilization of current multifamily zone land in Everett. I think that this rethink housing process is an opportunity to explore a variety of housing types in the appropriate zones. And so I'm not sure that I know I cannot support the first point. On the second point, this seems to be putting the cart before the horse. I think that the meat of the resolution as drafted is really setting of the goals and committing to meaningful outreach. And I think those are both very important, complicated by COVID, obviously, but that is the kind of hard work that staff has to bear the brunt of, but we as the Planning Commission need to make sure that that process has integrity. And then finally, the timeline. I have no problem with the timeline, but one of the things that seems to be a focus, at least in the Planning Commission, is the cost of housing, the affordability of housing. And I think we also need to understand why that affordability is so challenging in Everett where it's not in other communities. maybe not as much in other communities, I should say. So we need to understand how we can increase the supply, but also increase the affordability, and that is in part a function of incomes. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Zelinski, you also have your hand raised?
Yes, thank you, Chair Yannisek. I have a couple of comments and a question. My first comment is just a general comment on the thrust of the resolution. I think it's appropriate for the Planning Commission to go on record with a resolution like this that essentially says that we acknowledge the social justice issues that are sweeping across the country, and that it is appropriate for us to do what we can to address them within our sphere, which is the planning and housing sphere. So I think however we land on the language, I think it's appropriate for us to go on record with a resolution like this. The second comment has to do with Mr. Koenig's suggestion. I think his suggested language changes on item number 2 are good, and I would support those. The question has to do with his suggested number 6. The question is for Becky, and that is, since we're trying to essentially provide guidance to the Rethink housing process, do you think that the process as it's currently envisioned by the staff basically incorporates all of the things that Mr. Koenig is suggesting in his proposed item number 6?
Thank you, Commissioner Zelinski. Yes, I do believe that what Mr. Koenig has suggested is exactly what we intend to do in terms of making sure that we're doing everything in our outreach program as we develop these strategies. I think I should just mention that number 1, December 8th is going to be one of our first housing forums as an informational forum. But yes, I don't know that we had planned to notify every single homeowner in the city of Everett. However, we do plan and do have a plan for doing that outreach to traditionally excluded, those folks traditionally excluded from homeownership opportunities. That's a heavy emphasis for the mayor, as you might read in her directive. And so I hope that answers your question, but yes, we plan to do a very wide, broad reach for public engagement as we go through our housing action plan.
Thank you.
And Commissioner Lark, I saw your hand raised as well.
Yeah. I think first of all, I want to thank everyone who brought forward comments. I think to echo some statements earlier made, like one of the key elements of this is to start putting together a pathway to home ownership. Because what we really think, one of the things we really need to talk about, and one of the thrusts of this is wealth building, community wealth building, and the disproportionate gap that exists between traditionally underrepresented communities and white communities for wealth, and the impact that has. So I do applaud. I think it was Andrea and Commissioner McGinn who talked about those home ownership pathways to home ownership. Going back and kind of looking at the resolution, I'm open to making sure that this is a transparent process and not to exclude anything. So the concepts and language put forward by I believe it was Mr. Koenig regarding additional outreach. My questions kind of follow with Commissioner Zelinski, the functionality, but I'm generally in support of that concept. We want to connect with people and bring in information. I do think going to 1 and 2, those are very I think those are couched and indexed by the notions of measures of effectiveness and measures of performance. So going back to like the rethinking the scope and pervasiveness of this, I think it's not saying that it's too pervasive. We need to have a conversation about the scope of single family housing in the city, and whether or not that meets our measures of effectiveness and measures of performance. If we have, because right now under our current zoning rules, because we didn't pass a lot of the changes that were made that allowed for more townhomes, more duplexes, more backyard cottages. That hasn't been passed yet. We're restarting that conversation. And so, now that we've done that legwork before, talking about expanding the building types, expanding land use patterns, and density allowed in current zones. We did that legwork for that. And so I think, if we look at like what does a single family zone look like, and the answer is, well, it looks a lot more like townhomes than it does a 20-foot setback and a 10-foot setback on each side. Then the question is like, does that meet the measures of effectiveness and performance that were informed and created by this process? But the reason why I do definitely want to have those 2 points in there and not have them be considered is because we're already asking people to consider. This is a recommendation. If the city council, that's all we can do. We can recommend. If they don't agree with us, they can tell us to go pound sand. Like that. And we want to have a deliberate, intentional saying this has to be a topic of conversation. Whatever that conversation ends up being like, that's fine. But we need to have people at the table who've been traditionally excluded from this process at the table, and we have to talk about these things because we can't not talk about them. And so that's why, while I don't really want to support throwing consider in there, because consider is already implied in recommend. So we recommend that you consider is us just kind of stepping away from saying we need to have this conversation. What are the results of that conversation? They are what they are. But 3 and 4 set up a really good metric and tools to have a productive conversation. But saying that we need to identify the things that we need to talk about. And 1 and 2 are things that we absolutely have to talk about. So that was my intent from it. So I don't believe it's getting the cart before the horse. It's just saying this has to be discussed.
I'm not seeing anyone else. Oh, wait, Commissioner Zelensky? Did you still have a question?
Sorry, nope, I just didn't
okay.
lower my hand.
Okay, I think that any additional commissioner questions or comments? So I guess maybe this is a question. Do we need to have a vote here to close the public hearing?
Chair Yannisek?
Yes.
This is Commissioner Lark. I do want to circle back and kind of pose a question to the commission regarding the suggested language addition for point number 6 by Mr. Koenig. Is there sentiment or interest in adding that? I just want to make sure that like a recommendation that was brought before, that's been written out, that that there seems to be interest in, we make sure that we get that in here and put that in there. I defer my time to you, Chair.
Well, I guess I leave it if there is any. If you're asking a question of fellow commissioners for any additional input, I guess that's anybody want to answer that question or have thoughts on that? I guess Commissioner Lark, I'll just add my comment. When I hear about the Rethink Housing project or the Rethink Housing effort that's underway, as well as reviewing the mayor's directive, frankly, to me, I feel like everybody pretty much agrees with the sentiment of what is being discussed here, but I guess I'm not seeing that these things are not already provided for and being contemplated with regard to the current efforts that are underway. And so I guess for me, I don't know that any additional changes to language at this time would really do much for me as far as what I see as really a need or really an appropriateness at this time for something that really just reiterates what I think is already going on in other efforts. So that would be my comment in response to that particular question.
Roger that. So there will be no motion for the addition of number 6 point to the resolution, correct?
Well, I guess I wasn't going to propose a motion, but I suppose we're not done here. If there was a motion, we can certainly have a vote on it if it's moved and seconded. I guess my first preliminary question was whether or not we want to close, if we even need to have a vote to close the public hearing.
And Chair Yanasak, there is no required public hearing for this. This is a resolution, so there's no need to have a motion on that. Okay, got it. Thank you. So I guess with that, then maybe we've heard from the public, we've had commissioner comments. Any additional, I guess, comments or motions to move forward or to table?
This is Commissioner Lark. I just want to say again, thank you everyone for participating. I think this is a topic that has been that brings up a lot of emotion, brings up a lot of challenges, and really requires a lot of reflection. And actually, I want to say thank you to everyone who's been participating, the commission, to our community who's put input, and this touches some sensitive issues, and it could have gone into a far more heated conversation, but what it was I think a very thoughtful and well done conversation. So I do want to extend my sincerest appreciation to everyone involved here and to say thank you. And to close in, I think where this does differentiate itself from the intent of Rethink and the mayor's directive is that it explicitly asks for, I think, in 4 things. One of them we see in other places, the desire for equity, inclusion, and bringing communities who've been traditionally excluded to the table. We see that here. I think you can never reiterate that enough to make sure that in any way, shape, or form that it is on the record that this is a priority for us, and to echo and to support the mayor who wants to do this as well. So that the Planning Commission is in support of this, of a key component that the mayor wants to do. So showing support there is important. I think asking for explicitly measures of effectiveness and measures of performance is something that's outlined, but as a commission, showing the importance of showing that we support that component is important, and it needs to be part of it, and is also putting on record, not just that there is broad support for effective measures of effectiveness and measures of performance. And I think where this one does differentiate from the other components is that we want to ask 2 very specific questions, about the building types and about the scope of single family land use. And so those, I think it is complementary in the right ways, and I think it puts on the agenda the questions that we really need to ask. And that's why I would urge every commissioner to support this, and I would also thank every commissioner for their comments, and I sincerely appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay, so we do have this being proposed. I don't know if anybody has a motion or not.
This is Commissioner Lark. I move to adopt Resolution 20-05.
Do we have a second?
This is Commissioner Zielinski. I will second the motion.
Okay, with that then, I think we will move to a vote. Kathy, do you want to call through the roll?
Commissioner Lark?
Yes.
Commissioner?
Yes.
Commissioner Zielinski?
Yes.
Commissioner Beck?
Abstain.
Commissioner Tisdale?
No. Mine is around number 1. I think the idea and the concept and the conversation is great, but I just really, no, thank you.
Commissioner Lavra?
Yes.
Chair Yanasak?
No.
Okay, with 4 votes, motion passed.
Okay. I guess that brings us to the end of our scheduled items. David or staff, any last minute or additional information before we close? Other business?
Just one thing I didn't mention at the beginning of the meeting is that we don't have any other business for you folks through the end of this year, I don't believe. So, no more fun times on Zoom Teams meetings for at least another month and a half for you. Thank you for all your work this year.
Thank you, and no more David Stalheim to kick around. Well, we'll miss you, David. Congratulations on your retirement, and best of everything to you.
Best to you, Dave.
Thank you.
Chair Anderson.
Okay. Yes.
Tisdale here. You know, on this affordable housing deal, and it somewhat goes with the motion that just passed. You know, the marketplace is where really this stuff gets decided. And I was in a meeting today with some banking folks, and one of the things that was being looked at was apartments. And the rental rates in Seattle and greater Seattle, excuse me, it's not just downtown by South Lake Union, are up 7%, or excuse me, are down 7%. And then they ran the same study on Everett, Marysville to the county line along the I-5 corridor for the same kind of population, and it's up 1.5%. And so, you know, the person moving out of an expensive area and moving into a less expensive area, you know, that's really the dynamite in the jar, because you know, each one of those folks that comes up and bids a property up, no matter what kind of property it is, raw land to an apartment to a single family to a townhouse. So it'd be good if we could get some understanding of what, you know, look at permitting as an example. If you want to talk about affordability, you know, so it'd be good if we could get some conversation going and or some knowledge shared with us as we keep going on this housing issue, because it again, it's the market that is driving things. And you know, what can we do? You know, 30% of the cost of a house in King and Snohomish County is regulatory and permitting. So a $300,000 house, $100,000 of it has got no value. It was just paid to an agency to have the privilege to change the use of that land, to put a living residence that pays property taxes and other things that help the city. So anyway, I'm babbling, I'm sorry, but that whole affordable, if we want to talk about issues and how do we help and change that, we really need to understand the marketplace, because the same builder can build a house in Marysville and build that same house in Woodinville, exact specs, exact sizes and everything, and you're $150,000, $200,000 more. And so there's more to this affordability than I think sometimes we look at in our zone planning stuff. So sorry, it's off my chest. Have a nice Thanksgiving.
Thank you, Commissioner. Very fascinating topics. I think, yeah, you're right. There's all kinds of things to talk about in that area. Anyone else for the good of the order?
Oh, this is Commissioner Lark. I just want to echo, you know, what Commissioner Tisdale said. You know, there is a lot of there's a lot of from the document recording fees to how we do permitting. There's costs built into building on the upfront that I think need to be examined. But we also need to make sure that, you know, we don't stovepipe the conversation, because those costs also go to resource other components. So I think it's a very salient point he makes. But I also think it goes into the broader topic of how do we resource our community to achieve our community's goals, and the ways we're resourcing it, the most thoughtful ways. it's almost like we need some more measures of effectiveness and measures of performance. I mean, measure what you can, right? Measure what is measurable and make measurable what is unmeasurable. Anyway, again, I want to say thank you everyone for all discussion today. And I am extremely grateful for you all and the thoughtfulness and compassion and caring and inquiries you bring to this. So thank you.
All right, great. Thank you. Everybody have a happy holiday. We'll see you next year. This meeting is adjourned.
I'd just like to say thank you to David for all the work he's done for this commission over the past several years, and wish him a happy retirement. And congratulations to Commissioner Lark on his engagement.
Thank you. And David, cheers.
Yes, ditto.
Thank you to everybody. And I was wondering about Commissioner Lark, whether the Army approved that statement. About your engagement.
I just got an email from legal. We do not approve of the congratulations for your
No, whether they approved your engagement.
So
You might
I
want to put a disclaimer on that one.
I am going through a packet about 2 centimeters thick of all the. She is a Korean national, and so all the legal paperwork required to have that completed. And so, in fact, I have to have a counseling. We sit down and and the commander will ask us, tons of questions. And there's a lot of are you sure? Are you sure you're sure? And the Army is legally required by reg to ask. So it's been so far it's been an endeavor, but endeavor that I willingly and enthusiastically undertake because I cannot express my love and gratitude for her. She's absolutely amazing.
Congratulations.
Okay, is Kathy still on?
Yep.
Hey, Kathy, this is Catherine, Commissioner Beck. Do you need me to stay on? Because I pretty much had complete control of your meeting.